Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. My next guest I talked to in 2021 because he had been involved in a shooting as a law enforcement officer in Minnesota, and the whole thing surrounding the shooting and his recovery was absolutely fascinating. And I would advise you to go to our YouTube page and rewatch that episode. But I wanted to bring him back because this guy is really the picture of resilience. He took this traumatic incident and he's really turned it around to a point where he's out there inspiring others on so many levels. So I thought we had to bring him back. Deputy Sheriff Dustin Reichert, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back.
I'm happy you're back. You look amazing.
Thank
you. And here's the thing: your story, and we'll remind everybody of your shooting. But that wasn't the ending, right? That was the beginning.
It turns out it was neither the ending or the beginning, and it took me a long journey to figure that out.
So let's talk about that. Start with just reminding folks about this shooting that you got into.
You know, without going deep into it, because you're going to have to go into the archives to see it. But loud music call, Thursday night, full moonlit night, no party in the driveway. It was Bee Gees music playing. And the lowest threat of a loud music you could get. And within the next 30 seconds between my partner and I disco dancing in the parking lot, I was exchanging gun battle with the individual. And I was struck twice by two .45 calibers. And I struck him once, and it led to his death and a complete change in my life.
First of all, no one calls the police on the Bee Gees. I thought that then. I think that I'm just like, I have never heard of another story like this one.
Yeah, it's we were both surprised. I just said, "Hey, you hear that?" And she goes, "What?" And I go, "That's the Bee Gees." And then we both started disco dancing right there in the driveway.
So, after the shooting, you medically retired from your agency. And let's talk about how you started, because this happens to, most police officers who have been involved in an officer involved shooting or some sort of traumatic incident. You start to process all of that. And you made some pretty extraordinary discoveries.
It was a lot of leaps and bounds. I had to go from let's just say there were a lot of lessons learned by the agency and the administration that day. Go back to the other episode to figure that out. And I had to figure out my journey. And the first journey was, I can't be the cop I wanted to be. My arm was bothering me, but the process was breaking me. And it was breaking my spirit and my soul. And I loved to be a cop. I was fun, goofy, pleasant, rock and rolled when it was time. And so I retired. And then I spent the next 20 years drinking and partying and few treatments here or there, and it took until about COVID before I realized I needed more help.
And that's the thing, when you're forced to retire medically, that's a whole different situation. I've talked to a lot of officers, and I know you have as well, where it can be a real devastating blow. And a lot of people look at that and think, well, heck, you're gonna get a pension for the rest of your life. You might get free medical, things like that. But when you are forced out of the profession that you love, not by your own choice, that's kind of another trauma, right?
Yeah, I mean, I spent, 10 years in that career, and probably up to 10 years before that preparing and grinding. It was during a time where it wasn't easy to get a job, so we had to fight just to get the jobs. You had to fight to get past probation and training, and then you had to fight to find your place. And it was tough on me because I knew my place. I just gotten off the drug task force. I was feeling great. I was coming back in the fall. I just happened to be temporarily taking over for somebody while they were in Iraq. And I thought, wow, I'm not saying I can handle everything perfectly. I just walked out of that age or after the task force thinking, all right, whatever's put in front of me, I believe confidently I can handle it and with an acceptable outcome. And that is an amazing place to feel as a police officer. And A month and a half later, I'm sent in this spiral where I'm not only dealing with, fighting for my life, but I'm fighting for my job, my career, my reputation, and everything for something that I had no choice but to handle. So it was quite the loss. I was literally lost. I was lost for 20 years. I was just lost.
So walk us through that whole process, which I know it could take. We could talk about this for days, but walk us through it and what you started to discover as you moved forward.
When I had right towards the end of the fight with the agency, I had gone through some EMDR training. I said it wrong in the last episode, but it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Super powerful. Some people don't love it because it is very vivid, but I find that most cops I know, we run into stuff anyways. We just want to face it and get it over with. EMDR tends to be the way. Well,
Right, and explain to people what that is. It's basically it's flashing lights and things, and
you could have paddles that vibrate right and left, the flashing lights. My first one just did a stimulus like an HGN test. It's bilateral stimulation is what it is, and it creates a eye flow. My original therapist basically said it takes your memories that are locked in your short-term memory and downloads to your long-term. Not really, but okay. If you're a computer nerd, you have to defrag your hard drive sometimes. That's what it is to me. You have all this stuff all over, and when you defrag your drive in your brain, it reorganizes it. You can process and think better, because it's really about unprocessed trauma, and it was effective, it was powerful, it was exhausting, and then you thought you were fine because that's what cops and first responders do, or people. I feel better. I don't need to go back anymore. I feel better. I don't need to take medicine anymore. And I just self-medicated after that until I came to realizing that I have a problem. And in 2020, 2021, I realized I have a problem and I need to address it.
so how did you begin to do that? Because again, and we're told, well, if you think you need help, get help. Um, and but there's a lot of choices, but there's a lot of uh, you know, therapists and therapy and things like that. And not everything works for everybody. And especially when you're talking about first responder um, trauma, it can be some weird stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, to start with, and all my brothers and sisters, the badges and patches are going to roll their eyes. It's okay to get a therapist. As a matter of fact, I challenge you: would you rather be like me and wait until you're drowning to ask for help, or would you rather spend the time going out, finding the right therapist? Because I've had them where I'm like, okay, we're not a match. I don't go back. I go to somebody else. Find the person. Those are my four walls for that hour. Nobody else owns those walls. I find somebody I trust. I wish I had somebody that I knew and trusted. When I went the first time 20 years ago, she was amazing. I trusted her. I went back here later on, and I had one that just stared at me with big eyes. And she wanted to talk about the shooting. And I finally said, hey, I've been through therapy a lot. I'll talk about the shooting. I do all the time. I can tell there's something more. I just want to let you know. And then she made the mistake of asking me how something made me feel. And I was done after that. It just wasn't my connect. I did go to another therapist, and I said, all right, let's just be upfront with you. Don't stare at me weird. Don't ask me how it makes me feel. I'll talk about the shooting, but here's what really happened in my life that I realize have starting to come through. And she just looked at me, and Betsy, I don't know if you're going to allow me to curse or not, but she just looked at me, and she looked at me and says, all right, well, let's get you you can fill in the rest.
Yes, absolutely. and let me say that, and this is something we talk about as a profession, in law enforcement, we're really starting to learn now that just because you go to somebody that has a bunch of letters by their name or a doctor in front of it or whatever, doesn't mean that they're going to be able to help you. And especially, again, we're talking about police trauma, first responder trauma. What happens with a lot of our police officers who go to a therapist, they look it up online, or their HR tells them go see this therapist because our insurance covers it. Very often, one of the things our first responders do is they end up counseling the counselor, because a lot of people in the mental health field, they're not used to the trauma that we see every day. And what they think is traumatic is not necessarily what we think is traumatic. And your shooting is a perfect example. I think we're starting to learn in law enforcement that we just anticipate that people are going to be absolutely traumatized by their officer involved shooting. And very often we find out that there's so many other things. And again, in your shooting, you saved your life. You saved your own life. You saved the life of your partner. That's something to not feel bad about. And we kind of make you feel bad. But then, a lot of us, probably most of us, come to this job with other stuff before we ever get involved in trauma. Am I right?
Oh, so backing up, one of the things I didn't tell you. So I'm sure you know who Randy Sutton is from the Wounded Blue, and Randy was he had gotten these injections he was posting about. So that's actually when I went back. Happened to be in Vegas. I was like, all right, bro. We were smoking a cigar, having some Goldschlager together when I drank. He hates Goldschlager, but he would drink it with me. And I'd be like, tell me about these shots, dude. And he's telling me, he's like, well, I did it so I could promote it. But he goes, I feel at peace. So that's actually what started my journey. I went home, and for the next 3 weeks, I was like, I want to know what peace feels like. And it literally would get me emotional. So I went in for the shots. I made a mistake when I went in, though. I made a mistake of not having that mental health support ahead of time. So when those shots let my wall down, and I had an emotional dump and everything else, and I was getting calmer on one hand, but I wasn't prepared to deal with living a life with no wall down because I had no support system. And so that's one thing I want to tell people is make sure when you jump into these, just build a relationship with a therapist first, and then things become a lot easier. But what you were talking about, what we bring to the badge, when I had EMDR 22 years ago, whatever it was, it came out that I was molested when I was 8. Now, I remember it, but I forgot because it was like, all right, it was a one-off stranger, no penetration. It was weird. Pictures, but Polaroids. Didn't love it, but it was part of life. You just move forward. I didn't realize that stuff just layers in there and layers in that deep brain. And as I went through EMDR again, it was amazing at how I had to go back and finish processing that one. And a time where I was nearly drowned to death in a pool in Minneapolis by some other boys that thought it was funny, and in a bunch of losses. Grief is a big thing that we realize is a big thing. So I brought a lot of death to my badge, but I'm a firm believer that foundation, or that foundational trauma is what I call it in my speakings. I believe that your foundation and your foundational trauma is what makes you such a dynamic, different police officer. It's what makes us diverse, not just our cultures, but what we bring to the badge. The negative side is, when I speak, is what I call the post-traumatic response model, is we have that cup, and I might come to that badge with a bigger cup some fuller cup than somebody else, and sometimes it could take 3 incidents to overflow. Sometimes it could take no incidents. In mine, it took one big one, and it was really the agency response. It brought it to the top, and the agency just kind of pushed it over the edge, and I exploded.
Do you think that a lot of people are drawn to law enforcement because of their own past trauma, and they want to change that, make a difference, deal with it?
I think so.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm one of those people. I came to law enforcement because I literally grew up in a very nobody's going to know what this is except you and me, beaver cleaver kind of environment. I had, great parents growing up on the farm, all that stuff. And I really just thought I'm going to become a police officer because I'm going to save the world. And, but I have so many friends and colleagues who came to this profession with extraordinary life experiences, a lot of times as children, like you, that you didn't walk in to take the deputy test thinking I'm going to fix all this stuff, but that's kind of what happened, right?
I think deep down it does. I would venture to guess your world of entering the badge was probably more surprising than my world of entering the badge. For me, whatever I saw, I grew up in North Minneapolis, so I was like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. Oh yeah, whatever. Oh, guns, yeah, whatever. Oh, somebody got shot. Yeah, I've seen that before. All before the badge. So I do think that those of us come from a more chaotic life do often get drawn to it because they maybe want a better life, want to help people. My brother died of DUI. I had a passion and he was drinking and driving. I had a passion for getting people. My family had a lot of addiction problems. My passion was for drugs. I wasn't cruel. It was just my passion to see what I could do to help others.
I also think that if you've grown up in chaos, law enforcement's attractive because it's chaos from sun up to sundown, right?
It's chaos with a paycheck.
Exactly. And I mean that I'm glad you said that because it's really true. We see again, we say this all the time, your average cop sees more, trauma and violence and whatever in the first 2 years on the job than most people see in a lifetime. And of course we always have people say to us, oh gosh, how did you do that for 20 years or 30 years or whatever? And it's like, what do most of us say? It was awesome. And that seems weird to a lot of people, right? How do you explain that to people?
Usually, to me, my theory is that we're pulling it in just like a drug addict would. We're feeding off of those same chemicals that are rushing our body, the good feeling. Me, I worked out in the country, so when I'm going to a cold call, it could be a 20-minute red light and sirens call at 100 miles an hour. And I've got either 93X on, or I got a little mini recorder playing the, good super, and I don't even like heavy metal music, but that's what I played. And you just feed off the adrenaline, and then, something weird's happened. Most non-cops don't know, but soon as some of the worst things we've ever seen, we pull up window to window, and you just go, huh, did you see that? And, all right, so what time are we going to dinner? It's not that we mean it. David Gran is the founder of Brain Spotting, which came from EMDR. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had it done, and I researched it first. It's not impressive because I'm pretty sure he got distracted by something when he was doing his first session, and he just held a stimulus there. But eventually, his theory is that Brain Spotting opens the window to the deep brain. I don't know how it works, but it works. But his theory is and I really am attracted to this concept, is that when we're involved in an intense incident, traumatic incident, our bodies and our minds are designed to process it afterwards. Well, when you've got to go to another call and another call and another call, you just capsule it up, throw it in the deep brain, in the trunk of your brain, and just head off to the other call, thinking that you'll process it in your next trauma. But then, of course, the next call, throw it in, and he really theorizes that's why we fill up so fast, and that's why cops are so pissy when they get later on in the career. Not all of them, but that's why some get really pissy attituded, and these amazing performers just go downhill, and the isolation, and it just starts to spiral really, really bad, where great cops become less than great cops. Or, Betsy, my real theory is if we could find a way to get a handle on dealing with the layers and imprints of trauma that officers and first responders see, I bet we would see a significant reduction in officer abuse, corruption, and everything else. I really believe that strongly.
Do you think that if we allowed law enforcement officers to immediately process that crazy call, that bad situation they were involved in, that we could do a better job of preventing this kind of long-term bad behavior, long-term bad feelings, all of that long-term, addictive behavior?
I think the problem that we're running into is buy-in. We have to find a way to get the officers to buy in to the programs on top of it. I mean, that's true with any human being. Every human being can be great if they go to doctors and therapists, but getting the officer buy-in. But I know that we have to do something different. If you take, my partner did not shoot anybody, but she sat there from about 10 feet away watching her partner and her friend get shot. Then she found cover 2 days on her own, and then she had to talk to what she thought was her dead friend. And so after they get done, they go, yeah, you should probably go home. You got to work at 6 tomorrow. And they sent her back to work. Now, we're getting better about 3 days off. Maybe we need 2 weeks off. Now, at the same time, we want to go back to work right away. We want to be normal. It's hard. It's hard to figure out where the balance is.
Well, and you also, after a trauma, you don't want to be alone.
Yeah, that's very true.
And that's another whole problem. And, fast forward now to 2026, most police agencies are short staffed, some desperately so. So 3 days off, a week off, 2 weeks off is almost an impossibility with a lot of departments.
I agree. There's so many programs that are finally starting to happen. Even my own agency finally has an embedded therapist. I've questioned it. I'm not. I understand the checkup for the neck up concept, but it was implemented so poorly on so many agencies that it became a joke. Well, I'm hearing that some of them are finally getting it, and our embedded therapist at our agency now, I've had a chance to sit and talk to her, and I've talked to other of my old partners, and they say it's great. It gets them into teaching them it's okay to go to therapy. Of course, I always say, not for nothing, but I believe that you should also go form a relationship with somebody who's completely unrelated to your agency so that you can be fully open. But no, we're getting there. I just don't know how to get the buy-in. Don't know how to get the administrative buy-in when you have admins that say, well, Dustin was in a shooting. If they knew me, I get why he has PTSD, but why does this guy have PTSD? It doesn't matter. I was in a car accident once, and my lawyer looked at the other side when they talked about an accident I had 10 years before with pain in the same area. He goes, one in for all. He goes, once you take somebody on, you take it all.
Absolutely. So what would you say to police administrators, bosses, big guys and gals? What would you say to them to get them to buy into what you're talking about?
I have to be careful on it. So I'm with a group called LETAC. I'm proud to be working training with them. And my buddy, the boss man's always like, just remember bigger picture. We don't want to alienate admins. And you know what? He's right. The more that we push too hard the wrong way to point out the bad, the more they're not going to do anything about it. I think talking to them about, it's tough. The answer is, Betsy, I haven't figured it out. I think about it all the time. I talk to admins. I talk to leadership. They'll listen to my story. They'll listen to the stuff I talk about now versus just the shooting. But then I can go watch and hear reputations and policies and it's just, they never match.
How'd you get involved in hypnotism?
Yes, for everybody who doesn't know, I'm a hypno. I bought a DJ company after I retired because I was like, all right, I'm not going to be a cop. I just have to write this off. It is what it is. And I went to a training one weekend, and I just got my gallbladder out and was in a lot of pain, so I was on pain meds, and I just kept watching everybody as they were doing it, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to make money at this. And I love doing it. It's so different from everything else I do that I can go run and do a lot of training on officer stuff and wellness and writing or whatever, and then I can turn around and go to a hypnosis show, and it's unrelated, and it's completely just turns it completely different.
Does it work?
Oh, yeah. Oh, very much so. I was even in Indiana for the Indiana Sheriff's Association hypnotizing a bunch of sheriffs this last spring.
I love that because I have used hypnotism as a detective and all that. Plus, you're right. It is just it's absolutely entertaining. And
we can't do that in Minnesota. They can't use that for investigative reasons in Minnesota.
Right now, we did it to get more out of them. We couldn't either, but we used it.
We don't know anything. We didn't hear anything.
Yeah, Minnesota's a special place.
Yeah.
But one of the other things I want to ask you is, how did you start talking to civilian groups, and what's different about talking to civilian groups?
When I talked, I was just talking to, it was a healthcare group, but still, I was talking to a healthcare group this spring. And one of the things I said is, most people say to me, I was involved in this, but that's nothing compared to what you went through. And as I was telling the group, and I said, you know what? It doesn't matter. My biggest trauma is my biggest trauma. Your biggest trauma, reasonably, is your biggest trauma. That means on a scale, they are no different whatsoever. I may have to do some more work. And it was amazing, all the people that came up and talked to me afterwards and were like, I never really thought of it that way. And I was like, well, now are you thinking about the idea of addressing it? And everyone that came and talked to me is like, yeah, I had never thought about going to therapy or addressing it. And I think it was 5 or 6 of them came up to me afterwards.
See, I think that's very powerful because obviously, as cops, we know that there's this whole civilian population who have had all kinds of horrific traumas, whether it's as a child, whether it's as an adult, whatever. And I'm so glad you said it in that way. Your trauma is your trauma, because again, I've talked to people who say the same thing. I didn't experience anything like you did. Well, yeah, but for you, this was a huge deal. Now, let me flip that on its head. we're seeing now, and I hear this, in my own training classes and from other people in our profession, that we have a generation or two of police officers who can't deal with any trauma. In other words, I mean, I've literally talked to 24-year-old cops who are like, "Oh, I saw a dead baby last week. I have post-traumatic stress. I don't think I can go on." And it's like, you know, somebody like me, it's like if you saw a dead baby, which is a horrible thing to see, and now you don't think you can go on, maybe this is the profession for you. How do we deal with that?
It's funny that you say that because, of course, number one, the old crotchety ones, I guess we're probably in that territory now.
That's me.
We're so different than them. I have two lanes on that one. My partner in my shooting is now a professor at Winona State University, and I have the honor of going to talk to her classes every spring. And these are some of the greatest students I've ever interacted with, and they're so educated and knowledgeable. Now I think what's happening is that they're so well educated on PTSD, and I love that it's a general term. Some people get mad when somebody say, "Yeah, I had this happen to me. I have PTSD," and that makes a lot of cops mad. I think it's great on one hand because finally it's normalized, which means it can be normal for us to have PTSD responses. Now, when that model I talked about, the post-traumatic stress response model, that's the whole point, is if we address and stop thinking of PTSD as the full end run, and instead of looking at the moment, maybe by law or by rule, that person may have had PTSD from that child death. It may have happened. By definition, totally. Cops don't tend to be disabled from PTSD. They tend to be disabled from complex PTSD. A lot of people out there will know it as cumulative PTSD, but it's in the Bible finally. It's complex PTSD. It was reserved for sex trafficking and repeated abuse people, the layering. So finally, it's out there. Now we have a chance to educate them, our officers, to understand, all right, yeah, it was a pretty traumatic incident. You don't need to retire out. How about you go start working on it, get some EMDR, start addressing it. There's probably layers they haven't done with, and get back to the job.
I love it. That's that, because we don't want to throw away all these cops, but we want to deal with their trauma. Now, you've written about this stuff as well, right?
I have. I wrote my book about 1088, which is more about the shooting and the first layers. I love it because the first layers are about what I first dealt with, and I thought I was dealing with trauma. And then I got to be part of a book project called The Transformational Journey, and that was the second layer where I made an error and it went to editing before I caught it. It says that I injected ketamine into my neck. It was just a mild anesthetic. It's not ketamine. And then I'm working another one about complex PTSD and first responders. It's about a year or so out, though, still. I have two books I'm working on, one unrelated to PTSD. And it's layering the discussion on how we can, number one, get our first responders, our protectors, to open their brains up. It's okay to go get help. And number two, if they can understand how this all works, I mean, you change your oil on your car, you rotate your tires, and if you don't, you're going to have problems. And really the same thing's true with us. If we don't start addressing our stuff, it's going to end up being advanced complex PTSD versus I've got some trauma stuff I need to clean up. Let's just go clean it up.
I love it. I love it. Dustin, where can people find you, the books? How can they bring you in? What's your socials? What's your website? Give it to us.
That's a crazy one, Betsy, because I have all kinds. So we'll make it easy. www.dustinreichert.com. That's where all my stuff is. I'm working on a podcast myself now, actually, Betsy. It's called Stories in the Struggle, and I have interviewed 12 heroes from the different responder worlds about their different journeys in PTSD, and that should come out in a couple months. I'm pretty excited about that too.
Outstanding. Well, I got to tell you, I'm so glad to catch up. I'm so glad that you shared all these things with everybody, and we can't thank you enough for being with us. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.